One, two, three, four. Can you speak?
2, 3, 4.
I'm getting them.
So, what are we going to talk about today?
We're gonna talk about languages.
Languages, interesting. Like, what about languages?
I mean, we have similarities and differences among all the languages, let's say. And it's very interesting to just analyze the geography and the history over the languages, I'd say.
That's true. We were talking about this like yesterday, and I don't remember where was like the starting point of our discussion, but we were talking about like similarities of languages and how our regions. So where we are from, I'm from Iran, and you're from.
Azerbaijan.
Yeah. So how they are like not in the same language family. So this is like this huge tree that linguists use for representing different languages. Persian and Kurdish, both of them are in the European tree, and Azerbaijani is in another tree,
Yeah,
right?
it's in
Which
Turkic language group, so it's very different from the region itself, because in the region it's more in the European group, which goes up to England from India with the same language group. But for us, for Turkic language group, it's more Asian, not the same with the like Chinese or Mandarin, but it's also has its own authentic structure based on the grammar sentence, and which is interesting because if you just look at the sentence structure and grammar structure from India to the Europe, it has a lot of similarities, but it's very different for us. So when someone from Azerbaijan tries to learn a new language from Latin languages like French, Italian, Spanish, or just a Germanic language like English, it's very different for us. So, and the this talk between us, I think, started yesterday. Um, how we were discussing the language. We found one word. I don't remember the word, but it was how we started talking about that.
Yeah, I don't really remember when it started, but we reached some strange points. Like we found one Turkic region in, I guess, Spain, in north of Spain. Was it
No,
Turkic?
it wasn't Turkey. It was something similarity with the Basques in Spain, and they have similarities in their language with the Caucasian, I think Northern Caucasian language groups. There is one joke about that at the end of the nation's creations, the god had some multiple nations in his hand, or and he just threw all of them away to the Caucasia because there are lots of nations in there, and it's just a mixture, and they have a lot of differences in just small groups. So I wouldn't be very shocked to see some Caucasians in the northern Spain.
I see. I was totally shocked. And, and the thing is, you if you like look at the Europe map in this language type of sense, if you had a video feed, it would be much easier to show it. So it's just one thing for the most part, which is Indo-European. But then you have small regions like that region in Spain, and then a few other regions. I think one maybe in England that is from a different language family. But when you go to Caucasian, for example, or if you go to South America, there are like a variety of languages in
Mm,
very small places.
yeah,
Like,
natives, the colonist languages,
yeah, that's true.
everything is there. It's also interesting place, but I think they're mostly using the common languages like mostly Spanish, and
Hmm.
in Brazil they're using just Portuguese. But some areas that they have their own cultures and their own tribes that they just preserve them. They're speaking their own languages, but I think they're about to disappear, unfortunately. This is also another interesting topic, the disappearance of the languages, which doesn't make sense, and it's not good for the world as well, I think, because if we are thinking like like if we know that there is Latin language but not Latin people, but having Latin language, it's a very big thing for the world as well, because it's the science, it's the philosophy behind it's more coming with the language. It's not just language. When you're defining the nation, the first thing that comes to my mind is just language, because it's the one that differentiates from one nation to the other nation. except from like a cuisine or a culture that they have, the traditions. But the language is a big thing that makes difference. It can be a barrier, but it can be a big supporter as well at the same time.
Especially when we think about languages, usually what comes to mind is like English, French, and we don't know about a lot of languages that exist in the world, especially the local ones. I think a lot of languages in Africa are like kind of disappearing, as you said, because the people that speak these languages are dying, the last people, and they're being basically going to extinction. That seems to happen also in South America. Where else do you think is happening? Like, do we have such a thing in maybe Eastern Asia?
I think in Middle East they have a lot that, because in I know that in Middle East, in Mesopotamia, they have so many languages like Assyrian. They have Sumer languages like the from the historical
Yeah.
thing, and they are already doesn't have any impact on the main languages, so they are losing their appearance in the uh, among the people, because no one just speaks these languages. They're just speaking Arabic or different languages there, so they don't have any importance in there. And this is actually weird because they are very old languages, and they could have some symbols that explains the things in a different way. Because the language that we are using now, they are all affected by itself, and the way that explains the things, the way that describes the things, and just to have a look that it's it's very different from the old languages, I think.
It's
Because in the past, the language is kind of the things that how you can see the nature, how you can describe it, because it's how the language literally escalated in among the people, because it's the their descriptive analysis, the humans' descriptive analysis, to have the communication between themselves and the understanding each other and approach to each other as well. So having old languages and keeping them up. For example, I know I've watched one video regarding in Turkey. They had just one old guy that know the language of Urartu. He was able to read and write, and he was looking for a guy to just teach this language because he was about to die. And he was saying that this guy can earn a lot of money with this. And yeah, because he was just the only guy that at the same time speak and write. So if someone learns this language, he would be able to um, describe the handwritings on the walls, and it's very historical things. And Urartu is very famous in history as well. So that was very interesting for me as well to see.
But to play devil's advocate here, what is the actual importance of like a ancient language, especially a local language that doesn't have a lot of writings? It's basically just a means of communication for old people from like a few hundred years. Why we should try to keep it? Do you think it's logical to like invest money and try to keep them, or we should just let them go and use common languages instead?
I definitely think so, because if we preserve the languages, we just preserve the traditions as well. And if we lose the traditions, we just lose the variety, and we lose our tolerance to different variety of people that live in the local people, because we are not living with just the same nation. For example, in Azerbaijan, we have multiple nations, and it's very colorful to see people from different nations. Although with most of them we have the same religion, well, we have same culture. We have some similarities in cuisine, but we have differences in the culture, in the tone of speaking. So if we just lose the language, so if they lose their mother tongues, so they will lose their traditions as well, because if you are losing your language, it's easier to lose your traditions as well.
Yeah.
But the traditions are very important to keep for the future, because most of them have their own meaning. I don't say that each tradition is very good for humanity, like they can be very aggressive as well in some way, but the, the beautiful ones should be kept for the future. One more interesting thing. There is just one village in Azerbaijan, in Kuba region. The village is called Khanalır, and they have their own language. Just one village uses this language. It's not similar to any language in Caucasia. It's their own, like, authentic language for Khanalır region, and just in one village, the guys just speak in this language. So this was very shocking for me to know, because I was thinking that because in that region there are Lezgis that living there, but it's very different from this language as well. In just one village, they have this language. So that was also interesting for me.
That's very interesting. And especially you mentioned it's not like similar to other languages. So
Yeah,
it's
it's
not like
not.
just a small alteration. But you mentioned tolerance. That's a very interesting point. Like if we keep those languages and we like get to know that people had different types of ways of expressing themselves, it helps us to understand, okay, this is a variety that we have experienced in that region. So it really helps us to like build a mindset for tolerating other people, to understand their cultures. That's a very beautiful thing. I think that's insightful because I'm not like that. You know, that's the kind of person that thinks about past and is like, it was glorious.
I love the past to see retrospect. Even the differences are beautiful for me. Like even in our group as well. And to see how overseas we have this, like from Azerbaijan to Algeria, up to Algeria. Imagine like how many miles it's, and we have the same words.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not only Arabic. It's not only Arabic. We have Turkish words. And last time, Algerian guy was saying, "Oh, do you know shorba?" And Kazakh girl just responded, "Oh yeah, of course I know shorba." But
Yeah.
this is so beautiful for me. This is kind of having the same um, attitudes, having the same cultures in some way, but with coming with the differences. This collision is so beautiful. It's very colorful for me.
Yes, and we always have these like conflicts that we have claims that this dish is ours.
Yeah,
We
that's
even
also
have
an
it with the
interesting
Indian
topic.
guy. He's saying korma sabzi. Guys, the Persian guys who are listening know that it's the most Persian cuisine ever. Like nobody can make claims. And the Indian guy is like, yeah, it's definitely ours. We have these conflicts
After 10
in that
years,
region.
this guy will tell that kebab is Indian dish.
Yeah, just Indians just get every dish from every part of the world and call it theirs. They are selling our dishes. I don't like that. Yeah, that was a really interesting point. But I think we can appreciate this type of stuff without delving deep into history. So for me, like something like Roman Empire is really interesting. How often do you think about Roman Empire?
Guys.
It's a good example for me, like of the type of history that you're like, oh my god, how did they build that? And if you look at Egypt too, also there are like some amazing things. But I'm not like the type of guy that wants to sit down and read every bit of history. Maybe
But
local
every
history.
guy would do like at least once in his life. Can I be the next Caesar? I mean, I can't differentiate why it's common for other guys as well. I was thinking like it's just my circle, like around me, the people around me, just thinking about the Roman Empire, the other empires. It shouldn't be just Roman Empire. I don't know really. Before we were talking about the language and tolerance and then appreciation of the languages.
Yeah, I think sometimes languages and like cultures, not languages that much, but cultures can push us inwards, like into our circles, They can make us intolerant in some senses. So maybe that's also an aspect that we can look at. But generally speaking, I see your point about expanding the tolerance and kind of having the mindset that we can sit together and appreciate the differences and similarities. But we need to expand on those like stuff that we had, those discussions that we have about the wars. Those are very interesting. Although Arabic is the usual suspect, it's coming from Arabic most of the times. But yeah,
Or Ottomans.
yeah, that
Yeah.
too.
If we just focus on the languages, I think for our region, like at least me, from this region, I think that I don't have that much information about the other parts of the world. For example, I don't know how the languages work in Africa, for example. That's also interesting, how they are structuring their work. I mean, if we just understand how they're structured, we would understand how they evaluated from the past to today, because at least they created some sort of communication with each other, and they had something in their mind to create this. For example, for us, they were saying that for Turkic people, our own words, Turkic words, are so short because they don't want to uh, annoyed get annoyed with the longer words. They're just saying like For example, for us, it's mostly verbs. All of the verbs are Turkic words. So it's like go, see, come, like these kind of words are very short. For example, get, gel, otur, seç, everything. Seçil, everything is very short. And this comes from their um, military things. So this is like commands. So
I
military
see.
commands.
Yeah, yeah.
This is what I mean. There is something behind of the words that they evaluated, they evolved during the time. So that's also interesting part. One of the historians was saying that since we were coming from the Middle Asia as Turks, we were just using some short words to just for like control their ship or just control their own armies very easily and just go to the point. They are very precise, concise, and that's it. That's how they form the language. And that's the thing for me. And when I see some other guy talking different language, I just want to understand how they structured their language and why this language is like this and how they are pronouncing this word like this, which things influence to their language and which differentiates this language from the other part. For example, French is very similar to Spanish, but it's very different as well.
It's similar.
It's similar,
In what
yes.
sense?
For example, the fr- I think Spanish is kind of the full word pronunciation with French. I mean, como they can say something comen. I don't know. I'm not sure
Yeah.
about this. I don't want to talk about that much because I don't have that much information. But they are very similar, and this because they're all coming from the Latin language group, like Greek, Italian, Spanish, and all of them are Mediterranean. So there is something like barrier between Germanic group and the Latin
Yeah.
group. For example, last time we were talking with our Algerian group mate, and he just told us, "Oh, there is Sahara in Africa that makes a
Ah,
huge
that's interesting.
difference."
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like enlightened at that moment because I didn't think about that. Oh, that is a big thing that makes difference.
And we saw
So
the difference in the map too, in the languages map
yes,
later on, and we were
yeah,
like, "Oh my god,
yeah. In the
he's
we
so
were
right."
looking at the language man, we just saw the difference there, and the guy came with this idea, and we were, wow, yeah, that you're right, man. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And the culture with the Northern Africa and the Southern Africa makes a huge difference. So we can say that languages are very correspondent with the geographical environment,
Yeah.
and also the cultures.
I'd say that's very true. Um, but the thing is, it's a general issue that I have with humanities study of uh, different types of linguistics, I don't know, sociology. They are telling us stories and they're forming stories, but we're not sure if they're true, you know? Like they say, what the story that you said, that these like verbs come from how they were leading their sheeps or their like military. But we're not really sure. They don't show us enough proof, you know? But generally the evolution of languages, irrespective of how it's studied or whether it's correct or not, it's a very fascinating topic. Like maybe each of us only have enough knowledge about our language. When I like read Persian texts from let's say 200 years ago, I see some of the words are not that close to me. Like I maybe even if I understand them, it's like okay, but it's not at all common now to use that word. Or some words I don't understand at all. That's a very fascinating thing. And we call the language still Persian. I'm like, what are
Hmm.
you talking about? I know Persian, I'm sure about that. I don't know what you're talking about. So that's a really fascinating thing. And also you mentioned that it relates to how it was like being utilized in that region.
And actually, like looking for the recent years, the language could explain you the technology as well in some cases because, for example, for Azerbaijani, we adopted new technologies from Russian because we were in Russian Empire, and at that moment, whatever technologies just evolved during that time, we just get the words from Russian because we didn't need to create our own words, and we got them, for example, car. Yeah. For example, now we have our own words, but for the traffic lights, like the new recent things just came from Russian. So this can explain some cases colonism, how immigration did work at that time, and maybe we can explain the new immigrations and immigrations in some cases. Actually, we are not the pros in this field, of course, but
In none of the fields that we're talking about.
yes, none of the fields. We're just sharing our opinions, but it's very. I'm very curious where this can lead us in most cases.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So you mentioned with Azerbaijani that some words, especially new words, came from Russian, right?
Yeah.
When did it happen? Because with Persian, we had the influence from French. A lot of new words for us came from French, and it was usually the intellectuals who brought those words from French because they were trying to express their ideas, especially when they were trying to somehow limit the power of the king. So they wanted to kind of express their ideas about liberation and freedom and this type of stuff. And they read a lot of French texts from the revolution, from the later on different French republics. And then in this act of expressing their ideas, they needed some terms that were not present in the language. So they brought them from French. But I think, if I'm not wrong, most of those cases happened earliest 20th century. Was it similar for you?
Yeah,
too?
it's same for us as well. Probably like the new technology, just the words came from 20th century, early 20th century.
Yeah, yeah.
But probably there are some words that I can't understand now, that they are coming from Russian, but they came from Russian as well, maybe from 19th century, but I'm not sure about this. But actually, there are some Russian words now that got them from Turkic words.
Mhm.
So, for example, fog, I think, is from Turkish word. Pencil in Russian is from Turkish word. So that's also interesting that time, since there were a lot of Tatars, a lot of Turkic people around the it was Russian Empire at that time, probably, that when they adopted this word, but they took the words from Turkish people around the Russia. So that's also interesting fact.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned again that the influence has become less apparent now. So some of the words that were common and they came from another language are not used now. That's also true about French words in Persian. There are some words that when I read texts from those times, I understand them, but again, they're not common. And we usually, even if it's not like a original Persian word that we use now for them, it's usually an English term that has replaced that French term. So that's also an interesting observation that you mentioned. All right. Do you think there's anything left to talk about, or we can?
Probably there is something left, but it's just that's all for our opinions, I think.
Maybe we can have a second episode on languages. Yeah.
Maybe later, not the next
yeah.
episode, but maybe later about the
Yeah.
languages, or maybe if we find something extending about the language topics like the cultures or cuisines, of course we can do that.
All right. So with that, we come to the end of our first episode. Thank you very much for listening. You can subscribe to our podcast on different platforms, wherever you listen to your podcast.